Greetings, folks. Joseph Kurski here. Time for the annual What I Read Over the Last Year video. Now, in 2024, I read 82 books, and I'm going to count down all of the books month by month, featuring some of my favorites. In January, I read 5 books. The Lost Art of Finding Our Way by John Huth, H-U-T-H. That is a great book about finding your way with landscape clues, trees, clouds, trails, etc. That was my favorite book of January. I read 5 books there. I also read In Xanadu by William Dalrymple, about his journey to China. Those were the 2 favorites in January. In February, I read 7 books. My favorite was a Puritan prayer book called The Valley of Vision by Arthur Bennett. That was my favorite in February. March, I also read 7 books. My favorite one was Once Upon a Town by Bob Greene. It was about the 1940s North Platte, Nebraska, and how the people in the town set up and ran a free canteen service, provided food for soldiers passing through North Platte. Wonderful tale of history, geography, and people coming together for a great cause. That was Once Upon a Town, Bob Greene. That was my favorite book in March. Now in April, I read 10 books. 10 books in April. I had a lot of work trips, so I had a lot of audiobooks that I read in April. One of my favorites was Lee Bullman's Eddie Cochran in Person. I love Eddie Cochran. I love music biographies. That was a great book. I also read The Lemonade Trick by Scott Corbett. It's a kid's book. I read it when I was a kid. It's a whole series. It's a wonderful book. I reread that one. But my favorite one in April was actually Richard Ratay, R-A-T-A-Y's book, Don't Make Me Pull Over. Don't Make Me Pull Over. It's all about road trips that he and his family had in the 1970s and 1980s in the station wagon. Don't Make Me Pull Over. History, geography, road trips. What's not to love? Landscapes, fun family times. Don't Make Me Pull Over. That was also one of my favorite books of the whole year, which I will recap here in a bit. In May, I read 10 books. 10 books in May. Table for Two, short stories by Amor Towles, T-O-W-L-E-S. That was one of my favorites in May. The Demon of Unrest by Erik Larson. I've mentioned Erik Larson in past videos. I love all of Erik Larson's book. This one's about a 6-month period around Fort Sumter, 1860, 1861, where coyotes howl. Sandra Dallas's tale about homesteading in Wyoming, 1890 to 1910-ish. I love that book, Where Coyotes Howl. That was my 3 favorites in May. In June, I read 9 books. An odd book that I read in June, but I still can't decide whether I liked it or not. I Cheerfully Refuse by Leif Enger. I liked other books by Leif Enger better, but this was interesting, and it's all about Lake Superior and some odd things that happened. In July, I read 5 books. Many of you know that I love convenience store coffee, so I read The Convenience Store Woman, about a person that works in a Japanese convenience store by Sayaka Murata, Convenience Store Woman. That was interesting. Wasn't one of my favorites, though, in July. My favorite one was probably Our Ancient Faith, all about Abraham Lincoln by Alan Guelzo. Alan Guelzo, Our Ancient Faith. And I also read, speaking of historical books, The Loves of Teddy Roosevelt, about his sisters, his mom, his wives, by Edward O'Keefe. Those 3 were my favorites in July. In August, I read 8 books, including Returning Light by Robert Harris. I thought I would like that a little bit more. It's about him living on an island off of Ireland. There were many, many pages about birds and sunsets, so it was a little tedious, but I liked it. Returning Light. The Librarian of Boone's Hollow, Kim Vogel. That was my favorite book in August. And I also read Go as a River. I'm from Western Colorado, and Shelley Reed, R-E-A-D, great name for an author, wrote Go as a River about Gunnison, Colorado. So those were my 3 favorites in August. I read 8 books in August, and those were my 3 favorites. All right, let's talk about the last 4 months of the year. September, I read 5 books. The Three Musketeers, Dumas. Finally read The Three Musketeers. That was actually quite amusing. There were some funny parts about playing tennis and, oh, I will challenge you to a duel. The Three Musketeers, that was one of my favorites in September. Knowing What We Know, Simon Winchester. I've read other Simon Winchester books. Knowing What We Know is about how we learn and how we teach. That's a great book. The Man Who Died Twice, Richard Osman, O-S-M-A-N. My first book by Richard Osman, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. That was September, my 3 favorite books. October, I read 6 books. My 3 favorites were The Great River. Since I was traveling to the Mississippi GIS conference, I thought I should read The Great River. Boyce Upholt, all about history and geography of the Mississippi River. My favorite, though, that month was Maria, the true story of Maria von Trapp by Michelle Moran, M-O-R-A-N. And I also finished, I started it some months before this, but I finished in October a biography of Isaac Newton by James Gleick, G-L-E-I-K. November, I read 6 books. My favorite one was 1,000 Hours Outside. I'm all about outdoor education, and that was a great book. 1,000 Hours Outside, Ginny Yurich, Y-U-R-I-C-H. And I also finished Treasure Island, Robert Louis Stevenson. I had never read that book. That was interesting. Those were my 2 favorites in November. I read 6 books, and those were my 2 favorites. In December, I read 4 books, including A Man of Iron, biography of Grover Cleveland by Troy Senik. And I also read Race with the Devil, Gene Vincent's biography by Susan Van Hecke. And I love music biographies, so that was a great one. Now I'm going to talk about my 4 favorite books of 2024. Now this is always difficult for me because there are so many great books out there. But my favorite book, and I actually didn't mention this during the month that I read it because I wanted to save it for this segment, Lifeboat 5 by Susan Hood, all about these 2 girls that survived a 1941 sinking of a ship going from England to the United States and how they survived. True story. Wonderful book. My second favorite one I've mentioned before, Maria, the true story of Maria von Trapp. My third favorite book was Don't Make Me Pull Over, which I previously mentioned about road trips across the USA. And my fourth favorite of 2024 was The Valley of Vision, the Puritan Prayer Book. So those were my favorite books of 2024. What did you read? 24. Look forward to your comments. Thanks for being here and keep on reading.